this is the right direction. This is the thing that's going to let us make progress fast on the web. And that's when I was all in on WordPress.
Hey everybody, welcome to the A2 Hosting Show. In this episode, we're going to be talking about WordPress and open source. And at A2 Hosting, we have a focus on WordPress. We're all in on WordPress. And mainly, I wanted you to hear from Bryan Muthig, our CEO and founder. 21 years ago, started A2 Hosting. His background going way back, even before A2 Hosting, on WordPress and open source and the effect it's had on his life. And then also a director of product, Aaron Campbell, longtime WordPress contributor and leader in our WordPress community. And I wanted you to hear some backstories and what has gone in to formulate our decisions about how we make our products and services, and how open source has been absolutely critical, and WordPress, of course, to our success now and into the future. So I want to start first with Bryan, CEO and a founder of our company. 21 years we've been doing business, but that's the same age as WordPress. It's pretty impactful. When you think about WordPress, Bryan, you've started and grown this company alongside WordPress. We obviously do other CMSs and other work, but when you think about our 3-year focus at A2 Hosting, what comes to mind when we say we're focusing on WordPress, and why?
WordPress is obviously the dominant CMS in the market and has been for a long time. So I think when we first started, it was obviously hosting in general. And at some point 10, 15 years ago, started realizing that the vast majority of our customers were running WordPress. And those were the questions we were getting. Those were the people that were coming to us looking for hosting service. And so it just made sense to really dive in and to understand WordPress, the community, the software, the application, how does that work in the hosting space as well. So certainly we have evolved as WordPress has evolved to become the dominant player. Obviously, when you're running a business, you're looking at the market and seeing where things are going directionally. So we've decided this is something that we are good at, that we can provide excellent service to our customers. There's obviously a large demand for it from our customers. And once we started putting the time in to really dive in and understand what it means to have a good WordPress experience, we realized that this was really in our wheelhouse to work on. So that's really where we've evolved from there.
If you look back around the time you're starting the company in the early days, is there anything that stands out with WordPress that you remember?
Yeah, the big story I like to tell is that we did a survey a very long time ago of our customers, and stories sort of how the company evolved and the relationship with WordPress was of course we started getting that feedback, right? So many people are using WordPress, and we asked customers also, what's important to you, right? You want great support. You want servers that are up and running, right? And this back in the day was a little bit more Wild West than the hosting side of things. But the takeaway that we had that was, at the time surprising, was the website speed and load speed of sites was becoming more and more important. And that was right around the time that Google started coming out and saying, hey, we want the fast web. This is important. We're also going hard in this area to increase the customer experience on the web in general. And obviously WordPress being a gigantic growing part of that at the time, and still. So I think for me, like that was one of the real keys where we got that feedback, and we started looking around and saying, hey, who is looking at WordPress performance? Who is actually digging in and trying to understand what it takes to improve those site load times and make those websites fast? And so those were really early days. I think we were fortunate to kind of clue in on that and really understand that by talking to our customers pretty early on. So that was when we started really digging in and understanding all the different layers that were required to make that happen. And so, we started doing that started seeing success, started seeing those performance numbers going up when we were doing certain things, and started talking, working in the WordPress community as well. And, kind of latched onto that because it was working. It was, we were clearly doing something very positive for all of our customers that they were really happy on, giving us positive feedback about. So that's really kind of where it all started on the WordPress side. That's how we sort of ended up here.
Bryan, I think obviously one of our 5 core values that we talk about, the first one starts with customer focus. I see from the beginning, what I hear there is we listen. We are customer focused. Could you tell us why and why that's important? What your thoughts around that customer focus that leads into the WordPress?
Yeah, I think the closer we stay to the customer, the more we're going to understand what the customer needs, what the customer wants. So we have always been a company that is trying to get feedback, try to understand where the pain points are, understand what we're doing well, things that we can work on. That goes for us specifically, but of course it also goes for the WordPress hosting community and WordPress sites in general as well. So for customer focus, that to me, that every company should be doing that, right? If your customers are telling you, hey, you're doing this really great, but you're not doing this, well, yeah, you got to listen to them. You have to understand, and you have to react, and you have to change what you're doing to accommodate that. So I think it all starts with the customer. It always has, it always will. It doesn't change. I still go look at support tickets, right? I want to understand what the vibe is. I want to feel what they're feeling. What are the problems that they're seeing? What are the things that they're running into? What are the patterns that we see? So I'm even still doing that because I know that's where it's at. That's where we're going to understand. And now we obviously do surveys and all these other things too, but talking to customers, seeing what they're actually going through, see what they're experiencing, signing up as a customer, going through that experience and saying, hey, this is great. This worked really well. Here's an area where we could improve. I think that's just foundational. It really is to any successful company.
As we've been focused on the customer and focused on helping our customers succeed, that has led us more and more into the WordPress space because WordPress has been a critical tool as it's grown over the last 20 years to helping small and mid-sized businesses and agencies really compete on a bigger scale than they were ever able to before. It has been able to shorten and simplify the path to success or to web presence like they have imagined. And we want to bring that to them. And WordPress is one of the primary ways that we do that.
Aaron, could you share a little bit? And you started and ran an agency. You understand our core demographic and tie that to your WordPress and your role for a second.
Yeah. So my background is in running an agency. I started a web agency just before WordPress started, so a little over 20 years ago. Ran that for about 15 years, moving from sort of the old school pre-CMS days of building on the web where everything was difficult and hand-coded into the CMS realm where we were able to use all these tools like WordPress to build things for clients faster, easier, more efficiently, and into things that those clients could then take over and run themselves, things that were easy enough for them to maintain. And in my role here in product, I'm specifically looking at what are the things that we can do to continue that trend of empowering agencies to build better, faster. How can we help them deliver better end products to their customers easier and quicker than they ever have before? What tools can we offer them to do that? The things that they need now are maybe even more advanced than when I was there, but I still feel those pains and understand those needs and the ultimate desire to deliver the best quality product to your customer as quickly as you can.
While we're with you, Aaron, could you talk a little bit about, so you're running this agency, you were doing other tools, however that was. WordPress comes about. Could you talk about your initial experience with WordPress, if it was agency owner?
Like many agency owners building websites in the space, as CMSs came around, I wanted to try them all to figure out what might be best for me or might be best for my customers. And frankly, the first time I tried WordPress, it wasn't there. I tried it in, I think, the 0.7 version, the pre 1.0 days, and it wasn't something that I could use, but I continued to play with it because I could see the potential. It was about the time that WordPress started delivering plugin capabilities, which I think was like, I don't know, 1.5 version days, that I began to see that I could use it to build sites that customers could more easily take over. Building a good looking site for a customer, one that did what they needed, that wasn't especially difficult, but one that they could continue to maintain, add content to, and grow, that was especially difficult. And WordPress made that possible. And that's where my first transition into WordPress happened, was the attempt to be able to not just build for my clients, but empower my clients to give them some of the control that they wanted so badly.
Was there a magical moment in those early days where you're like, now I'm going to go all in on WordPress?
Yes, there was. The magical moment that made me really go all in on WordPress was actually when I had a problem with WordPress, an issue that I found in the code and fixed, because that's my background, dev heavy background. And of course, the next update broke it. And I went back in to the WordPress project and said, hey, I fixed this on my sites, but how can I fix this in the code itself for the project? And someone there walked me through contributing to the project for the first time. And I saw that kind of community-led effort to constantly improve and grow WordPress. And I realized this is the right direction. This is the thing that's going to let us make progress fast on the web. And that's when I was all in on WordPress.
Because you had other people, thousands of people potentially out there contributing together. That open source to you might represent this community of people devoted to a project to make it better, or?
I think it was because I could see that the efforts of the many, of the whole group, were going to be far superior to any individual efforts that I could put in on my own. I had built my own CMSs. I mean, I needed to for customers because there weren't good ones at the time. But when I saw the collaborative effort that was building WordPress, I realized that would build so much faster and so much better, both with the breadth of talent and the breadth of sort of input and experiences that were going into that project that I alone could never bring to the table.
This is a great example of that network effect, right? Like, I mean, open source in general sort of started that, but this network effect in WordPress where one person's contribution adds value to the entire ecosystem and community of WordPress, and then somebody jumps in, somebody else jumps in, does the same thing, that stacks on top of itself, right? And you can see how that network of people developing this community just kept adding value into this ecosystem where it just grew this exponentially, because all of a sudden, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. Oh, somebody made a plugin for that, right? Like, or, hey, I'm trying to do something. Oh, there's a theme that somebody's, already out there, and it's open and it's free and it's something that I can test out with little overhead, right? I think that network effect is just so powerful. We see that in the open source community, obviously WordPress being a big part of that as far as the CMS side of things is concerned. So I don't think you can understate the importance of what that looks like and what that has really done for getting WordPress where it is now.
Bryan, kind of continuing on that, do you have first moment with WordPress building your own site, building somebody else's. I know you still do that because you're the tech guy, right? But like, do you recall some early? It doesn't have to be the very first, but an early experience using WordPress yourself that you want to share, kind of along the lines, Baron?
So yeah, I mean, I'm approaching things obviously from the hosting side more so than anything. I myself not being the web developer and site developer. So mostly it was trying to fix people's problems, trying to fix other people's WordPress sites, and kind of, as I mentioned, going through understanding what the experience is like from the customer's point of view. So I don't know. Quite frankly, it's not something that I've used myself to build site very much, but I don't know. I'm a problem solver, right? So it doesn't really matter as much what the problem is. As you point me to it, I try to figure it out and see if we can't make it better for customers.
You're a technical founder. I mean, you bring it, like you were saying earlier, you're in the nuts and bolts of things, and you're still passionate about it. So like if you put Aaron's experience, he's an agency owner over here, and your side, why you dig in and love doing these, like the last month or so, you've been doing performance that I know of, performance optimizations, tinkering. So like, can you kind of think about Aaron here as the agency owner, and then you coming in going, how you do that and why it's critical and what you learned from those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic to have such a wide array of experiences on the team and so many backgrounds that they're all centrally WordPress related, but from different points of view. Where my background was system administration, right? So I'm looking at this from hardware all the way up through the platform, up to the web server, and then starting to go into the application, whereas most folks are looking at it that, or we have others that are looking at that from the other end of the fence, where it's, I'm coming into WordPress, I'm a WordPress user, that, speaking to that user experience and what things are necessary and what things are good experiences versus bad experience. I'm looking under the hood, right? That's what I'm good at. That's what I like to do. I want to make sure that we're giving you all the horsepower you need. We're optimizing everything so that front end experience is going to be phenomenal, right? And that's why I think, I have a passion for that under the hood part of it. And then we have, which I think we're all very passionate about, but Aaron also brings in, for example, that experience of that front side that I don't have, that I can't bring to the table as much as somebody else can. So I think the combination of having these varying experiences and varying degrees of pieces that we're passionate about or that we're really strong in, bringing that all together is our goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to take all those parts and say, hey, how do we, from the bottom, from under the hood, all the way to that shiny finish and that beautiful paint job and a racing stripe that we're throwing on there, how do we make that look good and feel good and be that sports car experience, so to speak?
I kind of love that car metaphor, because it's like, from my agency background, I understand maybe like the kinds of vehicles that these agencies are looking for. Bryan gets in and digs into what then is needed under the hood of those. Parts of our team are really, the actual networking and hardware kind of folks that are, the drivetrain, the tires. We have the UI and the UX people on my team that are doing that paint job, that racing stripe, the final finishing details to make it exactly what the customers want. And it is cool because we are turning out these amazing vehicles, because everybody's still building that same vehicle, but they all have their own parts and their own backgrounds that make them good at those parts.
Talk about the under the hood. Start there. When I go under the hood, I'm thinking, if you're a mechanic, master mechanic, you're pulling up the hood, what's going through your head?
I wish I knew more about cars, and I could keep this going probably a lot longer than I've been able to so far.
I don't know.
Yeah,
under the hood is a website and server. Now you're back in your realm.
That's all I need to know.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah, I mean, we're really looking at all the layers, and in my head, I always look at the whole platform as a stack of layers, and they all have to be optimized for that experience to flow all the way through to the end users. So obviously, we're on it. It's a website. You're on the internet, so of course, all the building blocks, networks, servers, data centers, right? All these things have to be aligned, have to be maintained to provide the best uptime. Obviously, a very foundational thing. On top of that, we own our own servers, we own our own hardware, and there's a really good reason for that. It's because we get to pick and choose what it is that we're designing this car for, right? You can't have a race car if you're starting with a Pinto engine, right? It doesn't work. So we're coming out, we're just, we go out, we're looking, hey, what are the best CPUs for the way WordPress works, for PHP execution, for single threaded execution, which, as we know, for us is how we get sites to load really quickly when they're not cached. So those are things that we're thinking about, right? We're looking at, okay, we have cached, we have uncached, all of those different pieces are purposely being designed from the ground up. And we have an understanding of how all those pieces work, how they work together, and bringing that all together. That's what I mean by under the hood. It's, there's a lot of moving parts, and designing them all to work well together so that that site is fast and snappy and you're going to have a great experience on the front end. That takes design and engineering, just like a race car does.
Excellent. And you have anything you want to add?
Honestly, no. I think Bryan nailed it there. Like, there are some parts of the hardware, for example, that as someone who's not been as heavily into, say, the hardware, the servers, et cetera, over time, it's been so interesting watching the team dig in on things like figuring out which CPUs are the best CPUs for the type of hosting in various products that we have, and not just looking at basic benchmarks, but testing all the way to the website level, the things that Bryan was talking about, how so many, like a site is often loading single threaded, and everywhere that you see, processors are talking about how many threads they have. But the thing that made the biggest difference on actual end user performance for us was how fast each of those threads ran, not how many of them there were. And seeing the level of effort put into every one of those decisions has been amazing, because it really is making sure that every single layer is as good as it can be, so that ultimately the stack that our customers are building on is as performant and capable as possible.
We've kind of got it down into the hood and where you all like to be, right? But I want you to take a step back for a second and just think about WordPress and what it symbolizes on the web, and go, if I had to describe WordPress in one word, it would be,
man, one word.
Popped in my head is open. If I had to describe WordPress in one word, it would be open.
And why?
Open source, open community, open to anybody contributing. And I think being able to contribute to WordPress, I mean, I grew up in open source, right? I grew up with Linux coming out of the woodwork. I don't know if I could be or have been on the path that I ended up as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid having to buy, enterprise software to learn Unix and whatnot, right? Like that we like to use the word democratize, right? It democratized the web in the sense that anybody could go download this piece of software for free and go start playing with it and get a website set up, right? I mean, without necessarily needing all of those pieces. So I think that, to me, that open piece of it, just making it free and available for anybody to go get started and create something, is so powerful. It really is. I mean, it obviously aligns and follows with the whole concept of the internet and all the things that have preceded and will follow. But that, I don't think you can, I think we sometimes take it for granted at this point. You don't realize like that is not how things work. And so I think that has been such a powerful thing, just opening up to, billions of people, this ability to create and to, open up whatever they're capable and whatever they can imagine. I think that's really powerful.
You hit something there, and I want to go back to 12, 14-year-old kid. Would you be where you are today without open source?
I don't think so. No. I mean, being able to, install my own copy of Linux and start playing with Linux to learn how this thing worked. I didn't have parents that were engineers. I didn't have access to these things, right? I had a mom who bought me a computer because her friend bought her kids a computer, and that was like the thing to do at the time. But I don't think I had any clue. I don't think she had any clue that this was going to be my career, my passion for the next, 30 plus years of my life. But without having these free and open pieces of software on top of that available to learn and understand how it works and the guts of it, I don't know. I think that a lot of people wouldn't be where they are right now, right? And I think that, again, you go up from operating system all the way through to WordPress and what that's allowed anybody to go do on their own. It really is, just looking back, an amazing thing that's happened.
I can say with confidence that I would not be where I am without open source. Similarly to Bryan, the way I kind of launched my personal learning, the things that got me to where I could write code was off looking at open source code. For me, it was even pre WordPress. I did a little bit in Linux, but I think I actually kicked off with like some games written in QBasic, Gorillas and Nibbles, and you could see the code that came with them, and I would dig through. Like that's how I learned. And I think not just a whole generation, but almost like every generation since then has had the opportunity to see source code from any number of open source projects like WordPress, like Linux, and learn from it in a way that was so much more difficult before then.
I really like that word, Aaron, opportunity. I think that really sums it up, right? I mean, how many people now on this planet with an internet connection and a basic computer now have the ability to go out there, and their limitations are their own as far as what they want to learn, right? You can go out and there's so much content. There's so much open software. You can dig in to your heart's content and learn as much as you want. And I think that really is amazing, right? Where that opportunity didn't always exist. In academia, it was a much narrower opportunity for people that had access to that kind of equipment, software, internet connections, all of those things. Back then, it is such a low barrier to entry now. And with all the open software and everything, it's amazing. I think I still genuinely feel like it's just an incredible thing that's happened.
Guys, you got down into passion when you started talking about this, and man, we're really on to something here, and I loved hearing it. So the question I was going to ask is, this is how it's impacted you personally, and you started talking about the web. Could you guys talk about the importance of the web, where it is today, expansion, acceleration, with or without open source and WordPress? Just talk a little bit about the magnitude of why you just shared it, the stack. Now put it in terms of the web and what's meant for our planet and the web.
I'm particularly passionate and opinionated about how I think WordPress has played with a role in the importance of keeping the web healthy and growing and functional. So I'll try not to stand on my soapbox for too terribly long, but I think that not just WordPress, but open source options on the web like WordPress, and WordPress being the biggest of those, play an extremely important counterbalance to all the closed source solutions out there where some other company owns the data, the stuff that's on it. And without the open source alternatives like WordPress, it would only be those closed playgrounds that belong to other people, and there wouldn't be this sort of growth and explosion of all the individual people and companies being able to really voice their own things, do their own things, not necessarily things that perfectly align with some company that owns that space. So I think that they have played an important part, not just in the web's growth, but in the continued health of the web in a way that I think is extremely important and valuable.
It's incredibly interesting to reflect when you really think about the software that is powering us as a hosting company, the internet in general, and how much of that is built on open, available, open source, and on the backs of volunteers that have come in and created web server software, and that wasn't some centralized company. It's truly amazing when you think about it. It really is. And I think it's important that we look at how valuable that's been and what that's been able to do, again, to allow anybody to come there, set up a website for very low barrier of entry, very low cost, and get their thoughts and their ideas out publicly. I mean, it's as we all know, completely changed the world, right? I mean, it really has. Things that were local are now global. Things that, some mom and pop shop around the corner, can be getting orders from Europe now, right? I mean, it's because it levels the playing field, right? The geography doesn't matter. It really has turned us into this global world where we're able to learn about each other, learn from each other, and the openness of being able, anybody having access to be able to go do that is just instrumental to that being possible. And I guess looking at, what if we imagine that it was, the web, it was owned by some big, huge corporate, right? Do you think that's the case it would be? Do you think that we wouldn't have some rules and regulations that we probably would take away from that? I think the answer is absolutely. There absolutely would be, right? Now that comes, of course, the openness and whatnot comes with its own problems too. But I think, overall, this is certainly the path I would choose. I mean, I think the pros of just having this open web and having this open source has just created so many opportunities for people. WordPress has just become such a huge piece of making that possible.
You all just shared your heart and thoughts about this and passions, and man, this is rocking. Thanks, you two.
All right. Thanks, guys.